The idea of trying to discover the physical limits of musicians has been a question that has resonated with us since the beginning of time. Constantly, human beings have been in a search to find out just exactly how fast we can go, just exactly how long we can last for, just exactly how far we can push our limits in order to create music that reaches people in a certain way and communicates our technicality as humans in a way that hasn't been communicated prior. Now, me particularly, as a scientist of sorts, and also as a musician, I've wondered this question for a very long time myself. How fast exactly can we go? How hard exactly can we hit? How long exactly can we last for? What are the limits that we can actually physically take our drumming to in order to make it that much better? Well, my friends, we're here to try and find out the answer to that question today. Thank you all for tuning in. For everyone who's brand new, hello, my name is Nick. I'm a drummer, a guitarist, a little bit of a bassist, as well as a man of science. I work currently in the medical industry. However, just a quick disclaimer, I am not a licensed medical doctor, so fair warning there, just for all the people who are watching this is strictly educational as a video. This is not proctored medical advice. So if you have any questions about that, go talk to your doctors. And we like to ask a lot of questions on this channel. We like to learn a lot of things on this channel, and we like to take questions, use those questions in order to better ourselves, in order to become better musicians. And one of those questions that we're going to be answering today is exactly how far can we take the limits of drumming? So there's a couple things that we're going to be doing in this particular video today. So for one, we've got out the whiteboard again, so this is already going to be a great start. All of our sources are going to be linked down below in the description, so you can go ahead and check those out. A majority of those sources have come from the National Institute of Health and their Library of Medicine, so these are all very well authenticated sources, but that's where a majority of our sources are coming from. We're going to be discussing a couple of different things today based on just previous videos and also previous scientific discoveries that we found here on this channel to see if we can accurately determine exactly how far, how hard, and how fast we can go for as drummers. Now, before we get started to find out exactly what the limits are of this here venture of being a drummer, there's a couple things we have to think about first. So starting off on this whiteboard video here, we need to establish a couple of things first before we continue on in order to determine exactly how far, how fast, and how long we can go for. So for one, the one thing that we do have to ultimately remember, everyone is different. Every human being has a little bit of a slightly different alteration in how their anatomy is formed. Everybody's got a little bit of a different, body makeup as compared to other people. So there's never going to be a 100% effective way that's going to work for everybody. Just because everybody's anatomy is different, everybody's built just a little bit differently, and that's what makes us unique. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, so therefore this isn't going to 100% apply to everybody. But this is going to be a general oversight just to see theoretically what is the fastest, hardest, and longest that we can play for. Everyone is limited. So when we say everyone is limited, we have to keep in mind one thing. There is no endless cap as far as how fast and how long and how hard we can hit for. Eventually, everybody's going to have to reach their limit, and they're not going to be able to pass that from then on. As pessimistic as that sounds to say, unfortunately, that's just how science works. Eventually, we are going to have to reach a physical limit that's going to stop us from progressing forward. So now that we have these two factors in mind before we even start the video, let's go ahead and dive in. Before we start though, I check my YouTube analytics as any good creator should, and only about 0.7% of you guys are actually subscribed to the channel. What are you guys doing with your lives? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. We do a lot of fun stuff and a lot of videos just like this on here. We're going to have a lot more fun content coming your way, so stick around. It's going to be a fun journey. So we're going to be answering our first question here today, and that's going to be, how hard is the limit that we can hit? I'm sure if you watched a previous whiteboard video that I did on Aaron Kitcher, you'll see that I drew a graph that was a correlation graph to show the correlation between speed and power. We're going to find out by using that exact graph as well today, just a little bit of a smaller version, exactly what is the limit of power that we have. Obviously, we've got our power here and we got our speed here. This is going to be 0.0, so that's going to be low power and low speed, and this is going to be high power, and we're going to mark that as a 10, and high speed, and we'll mark that as a 10 as well. There's an inverse correlation between power and speed, whereas you have to decline in your speed in order to achieve higher power, and in order to achieve higher speed, you have to decline in your power. And as we know in the graph that we used prior, The correlation is a straight line. It looks exactly like that. So, max power limit. How exactly are we going to be able to find this? Well, using this graph right here, we'll be able to find these two. So, obviously, we know that we have to have a lower amount of speed in order to achieve a higher amount of power. And unfortunately, that's just how science works. Because unfortunately, with our body mechanics, in order to be able to generate the highest amount of power, I need to be able to generate this higher amount of momentum and force in order to get that power. And that means that I'm going to have to sacrifice some of my speed in order to be able to achieve that. How exactly hard can we hit? Well, that's the thing. We don't really actually have accurate measurements on how hard drummers can hit. We've never sat down with a pad that's been electronically hooked up to something that, say, for example, measures, pounds per square inch in order to find out exactly how much force is being generated with a powerful hit. Not only that, but you have to accurately measure between, the force that's being generated by the drummer and then also the surface area that's coming in contact with the drumstick and the drum pad. Because at the end of the day, it's a small surface area that we're contacting on the drum head, and it's also a small surface area on the tip of the drumstick as well. And having a smaller surface area means that our pounds per square inch is going to drastically increase. So what is the theoretical limit to power that we have? That's actually very hard to say, because remember, we have to keep these two rules in mind here. Everyone is different and everybody is limited. So some people are only going to be able to hit so hard, and some people are only going to be able to, generate so much power. And also, everyone's a little bit different, so everyone's power cap is going to vary. So how exactly are we going to be able to determine the power that we have? Well, based on a couple of different articles that I found. Based on just, as far as the twitch response that we have with different muscles, like in the wrist or in the fingers, we can actually very quickly measure out exactly what is the limit of power that we have. So let's just look at a couple different averages that we have. So from what I can find online, the average drummer actually expends about 10.2 calories per minute of drumming. Mind you, that is the average of all drummers across the board. That's including all different genres and all sorts. However, we're mostly a metal-based channel, so we know that metal drummers tend to hit harder, play faster, and whatnot, so we technically can expend more calories than that. So let's just give ourselves an average of saying that we, as metal drummers, expend a little bit closer to about 15 calories per minute. Exactly how much power can we produce with 15 calories being expended per minute just on average? That can be a little bit difficult to say, because you have to take into effect several different things. For one, how hard are you hitting? What muscle groups are you using? How fast are you going? Etc., etc. But we're not going to be worried about speed necessarily. We're worried about power. So let's assume that our speed is at its absolute minimum. So let's just assume that we're at the lowest point of our speed, so that way we can achieve the highest amount of our power. We're going to have to take into effect a few other different things. Oxygenation level. This is a massive factor, because not only is oxygen one of the key components to muscle function, it is also one of the key components to living. I know that's absolutely crazy to say, but yes, that's a massive factor. See, if we don't have the proper oxygenation level, then we're not going to be able to continue to burn this amount of calories and keep that consistent high power, because we need to make sure we're constantly refueling our muscles, refueling our bloodstream in order to be able to get the toxins out and continue to provide constant fuel, so that way we can keep on going and keep on generating that max capacity. So assuming that we get, obviously the highest amount of blood oxygen content possible, which would be 100, it doesn't go higher than that, and assuming that we're able to still keep up, the high calories that we're burning, which is about 15 calories per minute, which it's not necessarily a super high amount of calories compared to what you can burn, like, say, for example, in the gym. But as far as drumming is concerned, that's actually a pretty decent amount of calories. It's not too bad, actually. So assuming that we're able to keep up a 100% blood oxygen count and a 15 calorie per minute expenditure of resources, and we're able to keep our power at its absolute peak of 10 and our speed at its absolute minimum of low, we can generate actually quite a bit of power. Using mostly what's going to be found in your stroking technique in your arm is going to be biceps and triceps. So that's going to be the muscle that's right along this part right here and along the back right there. Considering that those two take up a majority of the arm muscles, and there's a few other little groups in there that don't really get used a whole lot, we can accurately find out exactly how much power we can use. So, mind you, these readings are the highest averages and the lowest averages. So, when using stick rebound, in order to generate power, biceps, we're able to generate a maximum of 51.6, the minimum of 42.2 when going very, very strong. Triceps, 35.5, and 44.9. Mind you, this is all using stick rebound. This is allowing the stick to actually rebound up, and using that as part of the way to generate power. Now, when not using stick rebound, we're going to notice a pretty massive shift. So, in biceps, we see a max of 53.3, A little bit higher number than what we were seeing previously, and 43.4. And then on triceps, we see 57.9 and 40.4, which is a massive jump up from what we're seeing, which means that when allowing the stick to rebound, we're seeing that we're actually allowing the biceps to do a little bit more of the work than the triceps here. When not allowing the stick to use rebound, we're using more of the tricep than we are the bicep. And then henceforth, we're actually generating more power from there, because the tricep is actually a lot stronger of a muscle than the biceps are. We know that this is a measurement that we can get when we're just sitting down playing, using as much power as we possibly can without using any stick rebound. But what if we try and think about this in a little bit different light? Say, for example, I was to stand up on a table that was about like let me say like 10 feet higher or so than the actual thing I'm trying to hit with my drumstick. Let's just go out on a limb here, okay? Let's also say that I caffeinated that day, because caffeine actually can help increase your power since it is a stimulant, and it also can increase your speed as well. But we're not worried about the speed again, we're just trying to worry about the power. We'll come back to that though in a later example. Let's just say I'm standing on a table that's about 10 feet higher or so than my snare drum, and I come down with all the force I can and just absolutely beat the crap out of it. How much power am I gonna be able to generate? If you do a little bit of math, and this is where I couldn't find any articles about it, so I kind of had to do a little bit of ad-libbing and do some math here. If you were to take example, the amount of force that you're gonna generate from jumping up in the air and falling about 11 to 12 feet, depending on how high you can jump, and also using the same amount of force that you'd be able to generate from these numbers right here. And also we're going to be using PSI, because that gives you a little bit more of an accurate representation, calculating the amount of surface area, which is going to be less than 1/8 of an inch upon initial impact. You're looking at probably a max power 626 pounds per square inch of force being generated if you were to jump from 12 feet up in the air and absolutely like try and beat the crap out of your drums while only hitting it with the tip of your stick, just as hard as you possibly could. That's the number that I came up with. Is that going to vary per person? Yes, but that for now is just going to be the theoretical cap as far as what power is concerned to be. Which, by the way, that's a ridiculous amount of number. Do you know how much PSI your tires take usually to fill up? Anywhere from 35 to 40. So that's a lot of power. We can accurately determine how much speed we are going to be able to generate as a maximum because of our graph right here. So remember, like we said, with power and speed inversely correlated, so therefore I have to lower my power drastically in order to increase my speed drastically. And this is for a multitude of reasons. As I discussed in one of my previous videos, a lot of this has to do with rebound, a lot of this has to do with stick height, and a lot of this has to do with being able to move your stick in a smaller amount of area in order to be able to generate that speed. Now, a lot of this I know sounds kind of crazy, so let me simplify it this way. So you know how stick height is pretty important when it comes to being able to play? When I keep my stick height high, I'm able to actually generate more power. But the moment I start lowering my stick height, I can actually start to play faster because there's less area for that rebound to happen in. Because of that, the stick can return to the pad faster, and therefore my speed can increase. Because there's less room to travel, therefore speed can happen faster. Now to think about this in the analytical perspective. Max speed limit. You have to remember is that we're using several different twitch muscles right here along our forearm. So just assuming that we are only using, and this is from previous videos that we've done, so if you're a little bit unaware of what I'm talking about here, we'll explain it real quick. There's two different types of twitch muscle fibers. There's fast twitch and there's slow twitch. So when it comes to any sort of twitch motion that's being used, slow twitch muscles tend to take up about 70% of the muscles used to be able to actually make that motion. Fast twitch muscles tend to take up the minority, which is left over, so we have to keep that in mind. So just assuming that we were able to, solely cycle out all the slow twitch muscles, let's just pretend that we can actually like fully eliminate that and we can only use this for some reason. Let's just assume that God gifted us with the ability to isolate just the fast twitch muscles and only use that and completely disregard our slow twitch muscle fibers, so that way we can achieve the max speed and blow everybody's minds. Let's just assume hypothetically for a little bit that that's like the theoretical, possibility. Let's just say, for example, God gifted us with that ability. Assuming that our power is at its absolute lowest, so that way we can achieve the highest amount of speed, there's a couple things we have to think about as well. Again, like I mentioned, as far as rebound and stick heights are concerned, let's assume our stick heights are at its absolute limit. So let's just say that the stick height is moving in about 1/4 of an inch space, which is very low, but it's just enough to be able to generate a sound. And now because of that, our pressure per square inch is going to be very low, because remember, we're moving within, it's actually so small that you can barely even see it on camera. Our PSI, or pressure per square inch, is going to be about 0.6 per square inch. Considering that with our drumstick, we are using the fastest amount of speed possible in the lowest amount of rebound possible in order to be able to generate a sound, and also using the lowest amount of pressure, and also just the general surface area that's going to be contacting with the drum pad. In order to actually generate an audible sound or anything like that, this is going to be the minimum requirements that we have to meet. Otherwise, it wouldn't technically be considered a sound, because you couldn't be generating any sound from that. So, assuming that we have this option right here, fast twitch muscles are the only muscles being used, that we're able to meet these minimum requirements, what's the fastest speed that we can go? We're going to take a look at a couple of world record holders, guys. So, the fastest recorded drummer as of recent years is a kid by the name of A.R. Pritish. A.R. Pritish set the world record for fastest hand speed by completing 2,370 beats in 60 seconds, which is ridiculously fast. Here's a way to get a little bit more of a graspable approach on it. So 2,370 divided by 4, which is going to be enough to be able to get down to 16th notes, 592.5 BPM using 16th notes, which for a world record, that's pretty ridiculously fast. Now here's the question that we have to ask ourselves: what technique was he using? Because technique is going to ultimately matter as far as what speed you're going to be able to achieve. And the technique side of things is very important. So in the video that he submitted, to be able to achieve that number, or really the world record being this number right here, he was using double strokes. His stick heights were incredibly low. He was using double strokes, and his power was insanely low. Because in order to achieve that high amount of speed, he had to keep his power very low. And in order to generate that much power, his pressure per square inch is going to be very small. His amount of rebound movement and rebound space is going to be very tiny as well, to be able to keep his stick speed going that quickly. And mind you, the kid was like 11 years old when he set that record, which, by the way, at 11 years old to set that record, insanely quick, and congrats to that young kid for being able to do that, especially that there's video evidence of him doing it. So if this is the world record right here, what's exactly the fastest we can go? Remember how I mentioned prior that, in order to be able to theoretically set the power limit, we were to use caffeine? Well, my friend, we're going to bring that back into the scenario right now. So caffeine is two things. It's an adenosine receptor antagonist, which means that basically it antagonizes the adenosine receptors by latching onto them and not allowing the adenosine to have its interaction with its own receptor. And it's also a stimulant. Now, here's the important part on why I mentioned the adenosine receptor antagonist part of it. See, what adenosine does to your body is adenosine actually makes you sluggish. Adenosine makes you tired. You know how when you wake up first thing in the morning, you feel really groggy and tired? You're like, ugh, and you don't feel like you want to move or get out of bed or anything like that? Yeah, so that's what adenosine does to you. Now, adenosine being the main cause of that, that's going to be an inhibitor to be able to reach high speeds like that. So making sure that your adenosine is not being able to react with the adenosine receptors is going to be a prime factor in this. Now, also with it being a stimulant, caffeine being a stimulant, that means that it's causing your brain to be able to react faster. It's causing your brain to be able to perform higher capabilities of mental function. Nerve synapses are going to be happening at a slightly quicker speed, so things are going to be moving a lot faster. Your twitch muscles are going to be able to start performing a lot faster, being that it is a stimulant, because nerve responses are going to be happening a lot quicker. Assuming, let's say, just as an example, we have a good healthy dose of caffeine. Let's just say we have a good healthy dose of 200 milligrams of caffeine. Now, mind you, that's nothing too extreme. That's, generally not a terrible number to have. I mean, that's the average of what's found in most caffeinated drinks, such as Rain or Bang or something like that. Well, no, Bang is like 300 milligrams, isn't it? That's going to be your average amount that's found in most energy drinks. So say, for example, you pop let's say something disgusting, like a Celsius or an Alani Nu or something like that, which if you're drinking that, I am so sorry. Choose the righteous path over here. I've stopped caffeine for many, many years and I feel great. I don't use caffeine at all anymore. But let's just say for this experiment, 200 milligrams of caffeine, and we're going to say you had that 200 milligrams of caffeine. Because caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist, what it's going to do is it's going to block off those receptors. and stop the adenosine from having its natural reaction with its receptor. Problem is that having that caffeine, it doesn't mean that it gets rid of the adenosine. The adenosine is still going to circulate around your body until the caffeine is done with its interaction, which is anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. Now, after the caffeine is done with its interaction, the adenosine is going to immediately latch onto its receptor and do its thing. And that's why you have a crash from the caffeine, because all of a sudden you feel very tired. The best thing that you can do is wait 90 minutes after waking up. I just realized I said prior. I'm an absolute moron. So say, for example, you wait 90 minutes after waking up. That gives your adenosine plenty of time to have its interaction with its receptors, be out of your system and gone with, and it allows you to get the full benefit of stimulant effect, as well as have the full benefit of an adenosine receptor antagonist. So therefore, you'll be able to have the caffeine and not crash. And you won't have to worry about the adenosine coming back after the caffeine's had its interaction and is gone after 6 to 8 hours. Using all the info that we have right here, you have 200 milligrams of caffeine. You have it 90 minutes after you wake up. You're able to solely isolate your fast twitch muscles. Keep within these two parameters, being able to achieve the maximum amount of speed. You would theoretically, and after doing a lot of math and discussing this and finding averages from a whole bunch of other drummers, be able to more than likely achieve 650 BPM using 16th notes. I'm just kidding. You actually wouldn't be able to get that number unless you took another substance. Which is correct. Because guess what? That number is a world record for a reason. That means that that's the fastest anyone has ever gone to date. Oh my gosh, that was a terrible voice crack, by the way. I am so sorry about that. But theoretically, remember, this is all theoretical. Theoretically, let's say you wanted to reach that number of 650 BPM using 16th notes, which, by the way, absolutely ridiculously fast. I don't know if you've heard that. We'll find a way to include an audio sample in if we can, or if we remember to. I'll probably forget. You would probably have to take some sort of an alternative stimulant substance, such as illicit substance, which, by the way, do not take illicit substances. It's very bad for you. I highly discourage it. If you do take illicit substances, get help, get into rehab. That's good for you. Not taking those substances. But again, this is all the hypothetical. I'm not encouraging anyone to take drugs. I'm saying what's the theoretical fastest speed that we can get. Let's just have a little bit of an increase of our dose over here of caffeine. Let's say you have 300 milligrams of caffeine now, guys. We're really pushing the boundaries here. And I just dropped the cap to my marker. I don't know where that went off to. Let's just say you increase the amount of stimulant and adenosine receptor antagonist that you're having to 300 milligrams, still 90 minutes after waking up. And let's just say, for example, you smoke. And again, this is a hypothetical. This is not encouraging anyone to take drugs. Let's just say, for example, you smoked 1 gram of crack, which, by the way, that's a lot, especially to smoke in one sitting. You probably would end up having a heart attack if it was your first time doing it. So just a little bit of a, disclaimer, don't do drugs, kids. Let's just say, for example, you were able to smoke 1 gram of crack, theoretically, have 300 milligrams of caffeine 90 minutes after waking up, and one last final thing, have an adrenal dump. Now, what is an adrenal dump? An adrenal dump is when your body starts to produce high amounts of epinephrine and or also known as adrenaline, due to a stress-induced state that your body's been put into. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the whole situation of fight or flight. That is the easiest way to describe an adrenal dump. Having high amounts of adrenaline has been shown to be able to drastically increase your strength, drastically increase your endurance and your performance and your speed. Let's just say theoretically you had an adrenal dump, had about 1 gram of crack that you smoked. Again, theoretically, don't do that. And 300 milligrams of caffeine 90 minutes after waking up, and you were able to follow with all these parameters right here. More than likely, you could probably achieve that number. Highly theoretical. I'm not encouraging you guys to do crack at all or forcing an adrenal dump. That's actually very harmful to you as well. And also, you probably shouldn't consume high amounts of caffeine on a regular basis. That's not good for your heart health. Highly encourage you guys to quit caffeine as well. That's also something that's just good for you. So should you be able to do all these things together to be able to achieve that speed? You probably shouldn't, unless somebody else breaks this world record by some absolute miracle of God. But just as a theoretical, that's about the fastest that we could probably go as humans. So now when it comes to stamina, this is something that is highly, highly important. This is something that not a lot of drummers really think about, because all they're really worried about nowadays is how can I go faster and how can I go harder? But nobody ever takes into consideration the stamina side of things. See, remember how I said prior that there's that graph of power and speed, and we did that prior? Well, here's the thing. Stamina is a very interesting thing. So on our graph here, we have our power axis and we have our speed axis, our low and our high points. But what about stamina? See, in order to be able to achieve that stamina actually comes in this way on the graph. I know, it's really strange. But because it comes in this way right here, this means that this is going to change. The low point for stamina is actually up here, and the high point for stamina is actually right here. And we have to be like this on the graph. You see where this is? We have to keep generally, if we want to go for a long time, lower power and lower speed in order to achieve the higher power of stamina. Obviously, if we wanted to achieve the highest amount of stamina, we'd have to have the lowest amount of speed and the lowest amount of power, because theoretically, that would mean that we could technically go forever. Knowing us, I know we can't probably do that. Let's just say you wanted to increase your stamina and get your stamina that high. What's the theoretical stamina cap? Well, you'd have to keep these two at the absolute lowest points possible and keep your spacing of your notes the farthest possible way, the farthest possible that they could possibly be. Well, there's a couple different factors for this. For one, remember how we mentioned prior the oxygenation level being a really big factor? Not only that, but also calories. See, it's both of those things that actually dictate how long you can go for. This one being one of the main factors right here, because calories are your main source of energy. Oxygen is also a source of energy, but calories are the main thing that actually drives your muscles to be able to do what they do. There's a couple factors that we have to think about here. For one, what muscles are we using? For two, how much oxygen are we getting? And for three, how many calories are we expending? The average drummer, according to research that I could find, expends about 600 calories per hour of drumming. And that's just on an average. And that's also taking small rests in between as well. If it was non-stop drumming, it's probably going to look a little bit closer to about like maybe 750, 800 calories, which is pretty darn decent, especially within like an hour span. Let's just say our theoretical stamina cap, just for theoretics, is 5 days non-stop. Let's just say that's the day that we want to get to. That's the theoretical cap for stamina, because that's probably the longest that we can go for without sleep before we start actually going clinically insane, which is another factor we'll get into in just a little bit. So we have to make sure our oxygenation is at prime level, our calorie expenditure is at its absolute minimum in order to be able to achieve that number, and also we have to be awake for it. Now, this is where math is very important here, because you have to remember a couple of things, guys. Things that we take and substances that we take dictate how many more calories we burn. So caffeine, remember how I mentioned that earlier? Caffeine, since it is a stimulant and an adenosine receptor antagonist, means that it's going to cause our body to start moving faster, and therefore we're going to start expending more calories than we do normally. How many more calories? Well, that's tough to say because it's different person to person, and it also depends on the dose of caffeine that you had. But let's just say that I have, like I said prior, let's say we had 300 milligrams 90 minutes prior to waking up, which I'm just going to abbreviate this for mins, and we keep a consistent dose of 300 milligrams of caffeine, Q8H, which in pharmacy terms means every 8 hours, because that's about the longest that caffeine lasts. So let's just say I have about 300 milligrams of caffeine every 8 hours, which means every 24 hours, I'm having almost a full gram of caffeine, 900 milligrams. That's what's going to help keep us awake, and that also means that it's going to cause us to start burning more calories than we really want. So, being that caffeine is a stimulant, and it's going to cause us to burn more calories, and we're having it every 8 hours in a fairly high dose, to be able to drum for 5 days non-stop, let's just say on average, like we said prior, the average calorie expenditure is about 15 calories per minute. 15 times 60 is 900 calories. So let's just say in metal drums, an hour of metal drums average is 900 calories. But that's going full power and as fast as we can. We're trying to really conserve with our stamina here. So let's just say, how many calories do we expend at a resting state? The average human spends, it says, approximately 1,200 to 1,800 calories in a resting state per day. So that's when you're at a complete resting state. That's when you're not doing anything. That's 50 to 75 calories per hour. So you're spending that many calories on top of whatever you're spending just on average to maintain. So this is looking at the average weight of a human being, about 150 pounds. This is our average that we're burning while just resting in a day. So that means that total for 5 days, we have to multiply the maximum numbers here. So this means over the 5 day span, we're going to be spending anywhere from 6,000 to 9,000 as a baseline of just sitting there and not doing anything. Now, here's a couple things also to consider. Caffeine's a stimulant, and so therefore that number is going to change. Caffeine, from what they've done as far as studies is concerned, you burn about 1 calorie per 1 milligram consumed. So therefore, if I have 300 milligrams of caffeine, I'm burning an additional 300 calories in that day. But I'm having this every 8 hours, so this is an extra 900 calories to add on every single day. So this means just resting, as well as having all that caffeine, we're going to be expending anywhere from 10,500 calories to 13,500 calories during this 5 day span. I know it doesn't seem like a lot when you really think about it and divide this out by about 5 days. That's only about 2,000 calories as on average a day. But sitting there and not doing anything, burning 2,000 calories a day, that's actually pretty damn significant. Now considering we have to actually drum, let's just say we have a BPM of about 10 BPM. Let's just say 10 BPM is the minimum that we go for. And we're going to be playing at quarter notes. So total over the 5-day span playing non-stop, we're going to be playing a total of 72,000 beats. Here's the problem with that, is that there's no data available to show exactly how much we can burn with just one strike of a stick. Let's just assume, just on average, that it's half a calorie. So let's just assume for one strike that's half a calorie, so we have to divide that by 2 to find out how many more calories we're going to be burning. So that's going to give us 3,600 calories extra that we're spending on top of this for maintenance. Let's just use the maximum number right here. That means that the most calories that we're going to be expending during this 5-day excursion is going to be 49,500 calories. Now, this means that we're going to have to keep our blood oxygen content to keep ourselves from cramping up at 100% constantly. We have to eat that many calories over the 5-day span, which I don't know if you're really a math, genius or anything like that, but that's 10,000 calories a day. That's a lot. Now, what's going to be the most efficient source of fuel in order to do that? Well, that's going to be carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is one of the most efficient sources of fuel when it comes to muscle function, because your body can actually burn up about 70% of a carbohydrate as compared to any other type of macronutrient. So protein, fat, sugar, anything like that, your body's going to be able to burn up that sugar and the carbs a whole lot easier than it is anything else. So let's just assume you have about 49,500 calories. Let's just round it off to about 500,000. So you're having 10,000 calories a day. You're not getting up to go to the bathroom whatsoever. And you are having 300 milligrams of caffeine every 8 hours in order to stay awake. So you would probably have to hook yourself up to a catheter so that way you could actually pee, because your bladder can't not hold urine for that long. And let's just give someone like the break that once a day he has to get up for 10 minutes to go use the restroom. Okay? You're still going to be expending about that many calories, and just giving him 10 minutes a day to use the restroom once, which I know that's a lot compared to how many calories he's going to be eating, but let's just give the guy a break and say that he can take really big dumps, okay? That means that total, in order to be able to achieve the max stamina level, he has to eat 10,000 calories a day, have 900 milligrams of caffeine, in order to play at the lowest amount of power, lowest amount of speed to achieve the highest amount of stamina to be able to play for 5 days nonstop, going without sleep, since that's probably the bare minimum that you can survive without sleep before you start having hallucinations. So yeah, that means that our theoretical stamina cap is 5 days if we have 900 milligrams of caffeine a day, have 10,000 calories a day, and use the minimum amount of power, minimum amount of speed in order to be able to do that. So let's take a look. Max power, 626 PSI, obviously using the height of 12 feet to be able to achieve the maximum amount of power, using maximum muscle strength, and in a 1/4 square inch surface area of contact. Max speed, 650 BPM if we are taking 300 milligrams of caffeine, 1 gram of crack, don't do that by the way, having a total adrenal dump in a 1/4 inch space of rebound using 0.60 PSI. And for max stamina, 5 days nonstop, taking 900 milligrams of caffeine daily, plus eating 10,000 calories daily, plus not sleeping, plus 10 BPM using quarter notes. This is a lot of useless math. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, did we really need to do all this? No, because remember, all this stuff could be completely useless, completely wiped out, mean absolutely nothing because of one thing entirely. Everyone's different. So is there really a maximum cap as far as power, speed, and stamina goes? No, there is not. Because each human is different, and because everybody's structured just a little bit differently, everyone's got a max power, everyone's got a max speed, and everyone's got a max stamina. It's just up to you to be able to find out what that max speed, stamina, and power is for you. But do it safely, just remember that. Which brings us to point number 2. Everyone is limited. Not everyone's going to be able to achieve these absolutely insane, crazy numbers. So just remember, sometimes you're not going to be able to achieve that, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a bad drummer by any aspect. All that it means is that you have your limits, and you can play within your limits, and you can do it pretty darn well. And that's what matters more than anything. Yet another whiteboard video, yet another large amount of information to think about. But at the end of the day, theoreticals are also just as fun to do as, anything else. So thank you guys for tuning in to this absolute monstrosity of a video using the whiteboard again. I had a lot of fun doing that and doing all the research for it. Again, the articles that I used for references are going to be linked down below in the bio. So with all that being said, y'all, that's the end of this video today. I had a lot of fun doing it, and if you want to see more whiteboard content, go ahead and let me know down below in the comments. But yeah, we've theoretically come up with the limits to our power, speed, and stamina using a bunch of BS math. But math and science, regardless, it's always fun to have a little bit of fun and experiment with these things. So thanks y'all for watching. It's been great having you guys around. Cheers, God bless, and I hope you all have a great and fantastic rest of your day. Have a good one.
Yeah.